I can look back now and see so much of what God was doing in those conversations because it brought clarity. It's the how Jesus can actually be not just the individual head of my life, but the corporate head of this body. This is just going to fulfill the original call of this church around being real. There's so much potential for really big, beautiful things to come out of this. Everything you really want is Jesus. He really is. And what I want more than anything is as many people as possible to know him that way.
Hey everybody, Chris Macky here. Welcome to VCCLife, a podcast for and by the Vineyard Community Church in St. Louis, Missouri. This podcast is a space for a church in transition. As we navigate change, we believe God is calling us into something new, a fresh way of thinking about faith, community, and what it means to be the church. We're leaning in, listening, and experimenting with what it looks like for Jesus to lead us. Join us as we wrestle, reflect, and step forward together into God's unfolding story. This episode is the conclusion to my conversation with Dannielle Strassner. We pick up right where we left off, where Dannielle was describing their very first attempts to pursue God's will together. That might be better than a lot of ways that teams and churches discern together.
Sure. It's certainly a very thoughtful, mindful way.
It's thoughtful. It gives everybody a chance to participate. Okay. But still, that wasn't what the author was and what God was doing and moving you into. So
Yeah. So what really started standing out as we did her work was how much relationships matter. And we all love that because we're like, yeah, that's who we are. I mean, that's what we're founded on, is people who can be real with each other so that they can be authentic with each other and bring their whole selves to the table, whatever that is. And she set for us a vision of decision-making that wasn't deformative to relationship, or put before us an idea that you could sit at a table and work could feel as good as it did when you were sitting at the table just eating the meal.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, we want that. So then we just decide we're gonna actually start doing our work as a team, following her process exactly. So now not just reading it to kind of grow and as traction. It was like, oh, we're gonna use her process now going forward. And inside, I was like, if this works, if this can actually get us to make decisions, this is just going to fulfill the original call of this church around being real. Like, I'll just jump straight to one that really mattered to me, is that one of the light bulbs that turned on from her material that I just didn't do out of my own kind of brokenness and my own way of, struggling with people pleasing, was to bring my doubts and dissent, my concerns, my worries, my questions to the table was actually a part of how we would hear from God, not the thing that actually gets in the way of us hearing from God. And before her book, I really believed, I think on just a gut level, that to do those things was disruptive to work and not helpful, mostly because of the way people would react when I would do those things.
Right.
And not necessarily even mean ways, but we question a lot. People will tend to get defensive of the thing. I do that when someone questions of me a whole bunch, right? It's just a human thing.
Or at the very least distracted.
Yeah, it distracts us.
That's me. I'm distracted. Now I'm trying to figure out the answers to your questions, and I forget what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
So it can derail discerning God's will together.
That's what I thought. Yeah. And what she was presenting is like, oh no, when you're sitting there and you feel like you're the only one in the room not tracking, don't shove that down. Bring it. Be humble enough to bring it, because maybe God is saying something to you for the whole room. Or maybe not. Maybe you'll bring it, and the response and the way the room would care for you, the team would care for you, will help you shift. But that either way, me bringing that thing to the table was essential to doing this in a together way, and essential in a way that it would even help greater reveal whatever it is that God is doing. And that was brand new to me and surprising and hard to practice right at first.
Yes.
It was really hard because I had operated the opposite for so long. Don't rock the boat. If everyone's tracking and they love it, don't share the ways that you're concerned or doubtful. Just go along, And so we started doing that in the room, and the conversations that would happen would go to these deep, deep places around what is church really? What is relationship within church? What is community? And we would get in these really raw spaces around both hurts and glorious things that happen in church community. Yeah. And yet we would leave with no structure discussed, right? So there was this tension in that season of like, are we not doing the job the church tasked us with? We weren't sure. I mean, Ruth's book kept telling us we would get somewhere, and we'd be like, her book says so.
It's like
we hope
chapter
so.
14, you get to actually strategize.
But there was that tension that I think was especially hard on Caleb and Emily, who were also trying to operate the church and do all those things. To be like, did we just spend 2 hours just like diving into that? For what reason, Yeah. And I can look back now and see so much of what God was doing in those conversations, because it brought clarity. What do you want and what do you not want in a church? Really getting underneath those things. And if you're not getting down to the core of those things, you can't get to the dream he was kind of setting before us in that early stage, because it required us to be real. And that just, I don't know, something about that got me really hopeful, even when there was some despair in the team and no decision would ever be made. And we just kept moving through the process, and more fruit started being born among us. The ways that we were relating to each other were so good. When like something would rise up that was like a conflict, it wouldn't be ignored or just moved on from. We would actually like address it in the room, in real time, and get something from it that was really meaningful. Again, establishing what do we really want? What do we not want? And we ended up landing on, we started doing the work of building an actual structure that we could recommend to the team. Like our original assignment, we said, let's start working on our original assignment. We needed to report to pastoral council
and give them, did you have a timeline? And
well, no, but I think they also had hoped, around 6 months. But Caleb and Emily were serving, so they could give more thorough updates as needed as they asked questions. But I remember there's this meeting where we realized it was like, oh, you know what? We're using this new way of deciding as we were doing the structure work and taking like all the data people had brought and like sitting with God the way, we had learned to now do. Stuff started surfacing, but we realized, oh, we're going to operate and make this recommendation through a way that when we hand it over pastoral council, won't do. Like they won't do what we did to get here.
Right.
And we realized we weren't okay with that. We're like, oh no, Caleb and I were like, I'm not going to do a different system anymore. Like this is how I want to do things. Right. And so we sat with that and realized, oh, our recommendation isn't actually like this detailed structure. Our recommendation is, will you consider this way of operating? This just way of doing all of church, all these things that we've learned in this book, that's what we would actually recommend. And then if you're on board with that, then a structure work can happen. But any structure we would create would be created based on everything we'd learned. And that felt weird to recommend to a group that didn't know all the details or hadn't been in the whole process. And so that, was a really surprising outcome. Was like, oh, here's a new operating system instead of a structure.
They were expecting a what, maybe a diagram, maybe some lines, and
100% a picture. They were expecting a picture, a chart with letters and lines.
And you came up with, it's not a what, it's a how.
Yeah.
Which is really fascinating.
Yeah. And you know what I think, even as you say that, what I realize is it's beyond the how, it's a who.
Yes.
Which is Jesus. It's like, oh, this vision moving every person toward Jesus. It was like this way of operating moves you towards Jesus. You can't do it and not get moved towards Jesus. You're just gonna go there because he's so in the thick of the whole thing. Yeah. And it was like, oh, it's the how to do that. It's the how Jesus can actually be not just the individual head of my life, but the corporate head of this body. And in reality, not theory, and in a way that remains relational. So that's like, oh, Jesus is among us, not just talking to a few of us. He's among all of us, speaking to all of us, leading all of us to lead us all together. And that had always been like, I don't know, like taglines of churches in my mind, or like hopes and dreams. Not any practical way. Yeah.
But not really practical.
Yeah. It was what you want, but not Jesus. Possible to actually live out in a way. I was like, oh, this could maybe do that. And in a way where I see like what would get me really excited as I was looking at this is like, oh, all these things I could remember leaders coming to us to, like in LC, as when I was a leadership community pastor. We never knew how to fix all the things. We really wanted to fix all the things people would bring to us. We spent so much time trying to think, like, how do we adjust? How do we shift? We weren't just like trying to put fires out. We were actually trying to like change and build and grow. And we would just get stuck on there was just so much. And I was like, oh, this will actually, like, if we get down to the core of what was underneath all those things people were bringing that they were frustrated about, I think this can actually alleviate that frustration and bring the thing they actually were hoping for that we couldn't come up with on our own. And that made me really excited. And then what got me even more excited, because that's not enough for me, like if it's only good for leaders and no one else, who cares?
Right.
It's like, oh, this way of operating a whole church becomes what I think is a way where you're actually being discipled in community, sanctified in community, grown in community. And that got me excited. Because I just don't want a thing that's only good for whoever's in charge of a particular role that we call a leader. I want something that's actually good for everybody, and doing that, like moving every person towards Jesus, and also doesn't let anyone get away with putting all the weight on a particular leader.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning like, oh, even my my well-being is on this leader, which we can do in churches because it's easier to do, you know. And this way of operating is like, oh, this just highlights that in such a way. Meaning, like when that's happening, it will just bring it to the surface and you address it then instead of ignore it. And I was like, oh, when it became something that was tied to the work that Jesus has given the church to do, not just about being a church organization, but the work of the biblical work of the church. Yeah, my brain just starts going crazy of all the possibility of what this could mean. And then those dreams that we named at the beginning felt like, oh, these can happen. These can really happen. People can be open and honest and willing and following Jesus and all over the board and all sorts of messes and still be really valuable and doing the work of the kingdom together at all stages of their spiritual maturity, age maturity, all that stuff.
That is exciting. Now, are you still excited? Yeah. Are you speaking in the past, or are you speaking like that started my excitement? And
yeah, no, I'm still excited.
Yeah, that's good.
In fact, like for a while now, I've been like hungry to get it out, like to start moving it out. And that's the thing about this process,
into the church and
out into the church, like equipping, right? Equipping. I want people to be equipped to know and really start getting in it with people where they can ask questions. And like these will matter. The things that this process does will impact both your world in your church and your world at work, and actually might start to make them feel more connected in a way that you haven't ever had before.
Yes.
And that's exciting for me. I'm just ready. I want to like get it out, but the process is slowly learned.
Yeah.
I mean, LSAT took us 3 years to learn. It won't take that long to repeat. Every time we teach, you learn more about the thing you're teaching and you get better at it. And I think that will continue to happen. But I'm excited for people to start getting their own teeth in it, in where they're at right now.
Yeah. Starting wherever they are.
Starting wherever they are.
In their life situation, their season of life.
Yes. Yeah. And when I think about that, I just know it's going to start doing stuff. I just know it's going to start doing stuff in people's lives and in our community, like and for the sake of the world and for the glory of God. And I know those are like religiously words you can just say, but I really think, it makes me feel like, I don't know, I just feel like big things. There's so much potential for really big, beautiful things to come out of this. Yeah, for us.
It's so great. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Which is kind of why we're doing this, is because I feel like there's a big invitation from God to do something really valuable and important. And I can't say it any better than you did, so I won't try. So let's keep going, because I think the chronology is consultant comes in and starts helping you, but also it's thematic. And we can continue on this theme of Jesus is the head, not just an aspirational goal, practically. Like that's a big shift in thinking and practice and those kinds of things. And so take us to how you've put that into practice. The consultant comes in. How did that shift things for you and your experience of putting these things into practice for the sake of not just the team, but for the church?
So the transition team started meeting in January of this year with the consultant. Like PC had already been meeting with him, but the subcommittee transition team, we started in January.
It's not the LSAT anymore?
No. Yeah, LSAT handed the work.
What does that stand for?
Leadership Structure Assessment Team.
Who came up with that name?
I'm pretty sure it was Caleb, but Caleb was totally shaped by his leader, David Stark, who is like the master of let's get as many letters as possible as we can in this particular acronym, so you can't even actually say it.
Okay.
They're both fully responsible.
Both under the bus.
Both of them. One of my great gratitudes around David Hughes, besides him being just kind of like a sage that's been referred to. He does just have what comes with age and wisdom, and following God for a really long time. You get shaped by that. But having someone who's been doing this, so good. It felt so good to be led by someone who knew what they're doing, right? Because we were leading ourselves while reading a book and learning, which you can do. She wrote the book to help that, right? But there's just so many limitations because you can't ask the book specific questions to your specific circumstance.
Not yet.
Yeah.
AI will help with that in the future.
That's a different story. Yeah, so that was so helpful for me to be able to ask questions from someone who knew from experience how to play things out. And he was just so helpful. And so having him lead and me being able to come in under someone experience and authority in that way allowed me to kind of be in it in a different way, which is really nice. It helps me learn better then because I'm only doing the task of that.
And so did he lead you through like practical steps, not just theological and biblical understandings of God and what discernment means, but it was like sit in silence for like super granular? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what were how did you bring the following Jesus from aspiration to practical?
Yeah. So he didn't get down into granular things like, have you ever read your Bible? You know, like those kinds of things. He's walking in, trusting us, saying that, yeah, we've established these parts. We have these rhythms. We'll always be growing in them, but we've already developed them and lived them out. So where he had us go, like one of our first assignments was to answer this question was, what do you need to be on this team? Meaning, what do you need? What values do you need from the whole group in order for you to do the work that this team has set before them? And we had to go on our own and do that and then bring those back to the group, which is its vulnerable thing because you never know. It's like, is my need going to be the neediest need of the needs of others?
It could be an emotional need.
Yeah, it could be anything. What do you need?
Functional need. Like when I'm talking, don't interrupt me, or like whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And then from what do you need, we got to what's the underlying value there, right? So like don't interrupt me, the underlying value there might be respect and so he helped us name what the underlying value was under the things that we needed. Some of them are more obvious than others. So through that work of developing those out, we shared them with each other and we had to say why. You couldn't just say like, I need to not be interrupted.
Right.
Well, why? Tell us about that. Yeah. And so we got to learn more. Like I've worked with these people a lot and I learned more about Caleb and Bill and David and those conversations around why they brought the one that they brought. Because he did limit us to one, maybe two, but really one, because it's the one you really, really need.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm learning stuff. And when we brought those helped us build what is called a covenant. And it's not a covenant that's binding to the level of God when he does a covenant with us. Yeah. But
Small
what we're
C
saying,
covenant,
what it's saying is these are what we're agreeing to each other for the length of the work. And you define what that is, right? Yeah. So ours is until we get the structure put together. You know, it's worded more nicely on our piece of paper. Yeah, so we did that work of building that covenant out with each other. And that work, I was like, this is really, it was just enriching work. Yeah. I felt closer to everybody after it, and it was so good. And it still took a lot of time. And David Hughes kept saying, this is like, you prepping your wall before you wallpaper. It's cleaning it, scrubbing it, getting it ready so that the glue and the wallpaper will adhere and it doesn't all fall right back off, the next morning, which has apparently happened to him, which is why he uses that example. So he kept telling us, like this is real important. And it's proven that it is, because as we've gone through other steps of like what we need to make a decision, the gift of the covenant is that you can go back to it and you can ask yourselves as the whole group, are we living up to what we said we would? And you can even bring it up as an individual when you think it's not happening in the moment. You can you pause whatever's happening and you can just ask for a moment of silence or a moment of quiet. And then you can say, I'd like to go back to one of our lines on our covenant, and you can read it out. And that sounds like terrible for relationship. It just sounds like one of those things you're like, that would ruin relationship. Right. And it doesn't. It actually, what it's done is it's created this really safe environment for us to like share more and more and more, because we know we have like these, I don't know what to call it, like guardrails or something that like keeps us all safe with each other and reminds us of why we're even there with each other, which is beyond just the work. Yeah, so he's been helping us do those kinds of things, which that's really practical. And what was kind of missing in that early years of LSAT, early months of LSAT, is we didn't actually know that about each other. Like, what do you need to actually bring your whole self to this room? and lay all the things out, the things that you're hopeful for, the things that you're doubting, the things you're frustrated by, versus waiting until they leaked out because you were upset or whatever, or the weird things that happen that don't seem to have anything to do with anything, but it's because it was something from 3 meetings ago that you've never named yet.
Yeah. So lots of practical. That's what David Hughes helped with. Lots of encouragement, affirmation, been there, done that. This, for lack of a better term, this works. You can do it in an organization. You can discern as a group together, and Jesus can lead you. So for him to be the head of the church in practical ways, not just aspirational or theological ways. That brings us pretty close to now. We're recording in the summer, 2025, the week that David retires.
I know, in just a few days.
In just a few days.
That's weird.
Do you have hope for the future right now?
Yes.
Like after David retires, is there?
Yes.
Are you generally feeling hopeful?
Oh, I think it's more than hopeful. I feel excited, which I'm not naturally excited about organizational things, because I am a person that tends to dread big change. Okay. It's not my favorite thing.
Yeah. What are you excited about? And thinking back over the last few years, when we started this conversation, it was 2021, very difficult time in your life, brutal, you said.
Yes, it was brutal.
Now, you're excited, right?
Yeah. Okay, so Jesus is real, and he is living and interactive, and it's taken me a long time to get where I believe that, all the way. And what I want more than anything is as many people as possible to know him that way. Why? Well, because if you know him that way, even a little bit, I just know you're just going to fall in love with him. That makes all the things that church world life instills in you, which is discipleship and growing people. That comes when you start to fall in love with Jesus. Yeah. I cannot make a person fall in love with Jesus. Jesus could, but chooses not to, right? He just doesn't violate people that way. He can compel us. He doesn't. Yeah. He doesn't do a love push in number 9 or whatever. Yeah. He just, okay. So what I have hope for is hope for church post-COVID. Pre-COVID, I don't know that I had much hope for church. Early months of COVID, church, capital C, church, bad shape. So many things. Disappointing, hurtful, sad about things that were happening in communities all over the world, right? And what I have now as a result of all of the work and all the leaning into this is truly hope for the church in terms of the bride, actually being this beautiful being that's getting ready to welcome back the one they love. And as a result of being obsessed with the one they love, other people are drawn to her because of that, where we don't have to have a ton of slogans or forcing people or pushing out pamphlets or those things. People will start being drawn to what they hear and notice and see happening. Jesus knew how opulent weddings would become in our day and age when he gave that metaphor. And they were big deals back then, but they're crazier bride obsessed now than ever before, certainly in the Western world. Yeah. All attention is on her, and he knew that. He knew that was coming. And so for him to use that so specific, and we're called to be like that, but not in the gross way that brides can be on Bridezilla shows. Right. Yeah. In a way that you can't help but look because of how much she stands out from everyone else because she's the only one in the white dress. And what I'm hopeful for is that this will go to a place where so many will still be human. We're still going to mess up. We're still going to have those things. But in a way where that doesn't diminish each other in any way, that it actually starts to be the space where we can be formed and we can release each other and encourage each other and do all those things that we would want church to do. But here's a way to actually do that's sustainable, doesn't fall on one person. No one has to be managed by anyone else. Someone's faith is not dependent on if their pastor is doing X, Y, or Z well enough or bad enough or whatever. You can't be a consumer anymore. It's a system that prevents consumerism. I mean, you could come, but you won't feel comfortable probably if that's what you want. And that's a start for some people. And I don't actually think it's a totally bad thing. Some people need to start there, but they're not meant to stay there. Right. Yeah, I don't know. I just see so much life. I can just go back to that vision that I had where the church turned and lit up and more people started coming out of the church somehow than were in it, just yelling out, Jesus is real, because they were just, every part of their being was Jesus is real. I think God, through the Holy Spirit, let me feel the intensity of that joy of more and more people yelling that out and knowing it and believing it. And the way that the churches that were doing that glowed almost, became so hyper saturated with color compared to like the sepia tone of everything else, stood out in a world that was all kind of sepia tone. People are going to check that out, right? All the things that I want for people in this world, which is Jesus, just feel like, and I'm not saying this book does that, by the way, just to clarify,
No.
But it is giving me hope that that's possible now. All the things we've learned, all the things that we're doing with each other, how to do real, like the way that had been the heart of David and Debbie from the beginning, in a way that grows and is sustainable, even if we grew to be really, really big or shrunk really, really small, that the realness doesn't depend on the size. I don't know.
It sounds like that's the kind of church where Jesus is the head, right?
Oh, yeah. And, even with that, like the head, we can think bossy or mean. Like Jesus is just not like that, right? He's the beloved. He's my beloved, and I'm his beloved. So like when you think of the headship as a connection of belovedness and intimacy, when he's like, oh, you're not just my servant, you're my friend. And friends get to know each other. They get to know what's on each other's minds. That's what headship with him looks like. It doesn't look like how we think of the Western world of headship or boss or leader. That seems possible in a way that mostly it doesn't when you think of it in human terms. But it's like, oh, yeah. And, I'll add, people always have their letters at the ends of their names after they get certain degrees, And I remember hearing a speaker once who kept repeating over and over and how he didn't have any letters. He was clearly really insecure. And it was a room with hundreds of people. But I was like, oh, you know what? He doesn't need a PhD. He has an MOC, which is the mind of Christ. And I was like, oh, we all have an MOC. And I used to joke about that a lot back when that first happened because then I thought it was so clever. I was like, I'm going to start signing my checks, Dannielle Strassner, MOC. But I actually realized in that time, it's like, I don't really know what that means to have the mind of Christ. Yeah. And I think, oh, this is helping me get that a little bit more. What it means to have the mind of Christ means that we each have access to that. And he gives us each a part in order that we'll stay connected and not become megalomaniacs, and become self-centered. It's like, oh, that because we each have MOCs, we're all equally qualified to bring what we have to the table of community for the sake of that community and for the sake of what God's designed us individually specifically for to do in our, everyday lives. And it's like, oh, I think that's pretty cool.
It's very cool. You've kind of answered the last question already. If you can put it in the form of an invitation. Okay. I like to ask that at the end of each of these. What's an invitation that you want to communicate to the people listening that you believe is an invitation for them into what God is doing in this church?
So I think the invitation, as you were saying that, what came to mind is I think of some different groups of people. I think there's a group of people who have already a deep intimacy with Jesus. Community is their hard space because they've been hurt by people, disappointed by people. They feel guarded around people. Being real is harder for them. And then I think there's the people who really love community. Community is a safe space. Community is their gift in their life, but they're maybe not so intimate with Jesus, not so sure. Varying places of faith, maybe that they haven't even confessed. I think for both those groups, the invitation is to risk being who they are amongst us as we try to teach and spread this out. It will feel risky. It feels risky to lean into more of Jesus for those people who would prefer that community part. And it feels risky to lean more into community for the people who, have just felt guarded. And Jesus feels like he's the only one that's safe. And why would you bother risking is because everything you really want in a spiritual community or in your hopes or dreams or whatever, I could say everything you ever really want. And one-on-one, I could convince you why it boils down to everything you really want is Jesus. He really is. You'll get some other things too, but he is actually what you really want. And to get the fullness of who he is, you need both that community part and the individual part coming together.
Love that invitation. Yeah, it's so good. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
I really sense that God is speaking in really beautiful, unique ways through each of the people who are being interviewed.
I agree.
I'm kind of hearing the same story, but it's so rich and deep for each person in your own perspective, And so I just appreciate it. And I think you've articulated things so beautifully that it's going to be really beneficial to people. And I think a lot of people are going to be drawn into what God is doing.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.